Hello, I'm John Foster, and I'm a medical doctor who does Social Security exams. And I recently spent a day doing Social Security exams, and I saw people doing the right things and the wrong things. And I think it would be helpful to go over those things if you're applying for Social Security and have been scheduled for a consultative examination. As usual, everything I say reflects my own opinions based on my own experience and study, and not the opinions of the Social Security Administration or any other medical body. Now, I've been putting up these videos for several months and really not knowing if they're helping anyone or not. Well, the last day I did these exams, I had a patient come in, I introduced myself, and they said, "Do you have a YouTube channel?" And it turned out when they were scheduled for a consultative examination, they Googled consultative examinations, found my channel, and watched a couple of my videos. Now here's the important thing. They did everything right in the history and in the physical examination. So the videos really seemed to have helped them, which pleased me immensely. So what did this patient do right that some other patients do wrong? Well, first of all, they showed up. I had 20 patients scheduled that day, and 6 of them just didn't show. Now, we did find out that one of them, who was claiming disability due to liver failure due to alcoholism, was in rehab, and that certainly is a legitimate reason for not showing, and I hope they recover from their alcoholism and their liver failure improves. But the other 5, no information, no cancellation, nothing. Here's the thing. If you do not show up for your consultative examination, it is 100% guaranteed that your disability application will not be approved. Even if you think your chances are small, small is better than nothing. So I would recommend that if Social Security schedules you for a consultative examination, you show up, and again, show up early, not late. Now, the patient who had watched my videos had several different problems that were contributing to their disabled state. And that is more common than a patient who has one problem. If you only have one problem, you usually need to, as they say, meet a listing, which is you need to meet the requirements of Social Security's listing of impairments, which I'll leave a link to in the description of the video before. Generally, if you only have one problem, that problem has to be severe. Now, I do see patients who definitely meet a listing, but they're in the minority. For example, Social Security says that if you have severe loss of use of both arms, or both legs, or one arm and one leg, you are disabled, but it must be severe. Well, I did have a patient who met those requirements. This was a person who unfortunately had a stroke, which resulted in complete paralysis of their left arm. They couldn't even twitch a finger. And great weakness and impaired control of their left leg. They could barely stand, and they couldn't even walk one step, and a medium impairment of their speech. That patient met a listing for one problem, a stroke. But much more common are patients who have multiple problems. If you have multiple problems to qualify as disabled, none of them need to be severe, but generally they need to be medium. That was the case with the patient who'd watched my videos. Now, the next thing this person did correctly was they focused on the medical problems that made it difficult for them to work. If you've watched any of my videos, you know that's very important because disability means you have medical problems that prevent you from working. There are many medical problems people have that have no effect on their ability to work, and you don't want to focus on those. For example, one of the most common medical problems that does not impair the ability to work is high blood pressure. The person who watched my videos had high blood pressure, but they didn't focus on it. They just mentioned it. The next thing they did that was correct was they explained how their medical problems made it difficult for them to work, and they were specific. Again, disability means that you have medical problems that make it difficult for you to work. Let me give you an example. One of the most common problems I see is low back pain. But having low back pain in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that a person is disabled. The low back pain must interfere with the ability to work. Here are some examples of the way it can interfere. It can make it painful to sit or stand or walk. It can make it difficult to bend over or to do heavy lifting. If you're describing such problems, it's really helpful to be specific. Not too long ago, I had a patient who told me that they couldn't stand for prolonged periods. When I asked them about how long could they stand, they said up to 3 hours. Well, there's a big difference between being able to stand for 3 hours and being only able to stand for 5 minutes. The same thing with people who tell me they can't do heavy lifting. How much can you lift? Give me an idea. A good example I've described before, I had a man who'd worked as a diesel mechanic for large truck engines, and he told me he used to be able to lift and carry cylinder heads which weighed over 100 pounds around his shop. He said that now he can't carry anything over 20 pounds. The next thing is to focus on the present, not on the past or the future. Social Security wants to know about your ability to work today, not your ability to work a year or two ago, or how you might or might not be able to work in the future if, for example, you were to have a consultation or some different treatment or even an operation. Focus on now. I had another patient whose problems had been going on for several years, and they launched into a long description of every doctor that they'd seen and every treatment they had in the past. Finally, I had to be a bit rude and interrupt them and explain that what I needed to know was how those problems were affecting them now. You can give a brief summary of how you got to where you are now, but don't dwell on past details. Keep in mind that our time is limited to about 30 minutes, so you want to use that time as efficiently as possible. Some folks have a list of problems they're claiming disability for. My record is one patient who claimed to be having 26 separate medical problems that were disabling. If you do have multiple problems, keep in mind time is limited. We have about 30 minutes, and it's best to start with the worst problem, the ones that's causing the most disability, and then work your way down. Now, here's 2 mistakes other patients made. One person brought in a really thick binder of their medical records. As I've said before, Social Security furnishes me with some medical records on each person, not the entire medical record. However, they do not want me reading people's medical records during the consultative examination. There isn't enough time, especially with records such as this patient brought in. that would have taken hours to review. It's simply impossible. Don't bring your medical records. The things that you should bring: number one, a photo ID. Number two, your medications either in a list or just toss them all in a bag. And number three, if you wear eyeglasses, your eyeglasses, because we check the vision on each patient. Another patient claimed that they had a fairly serious disease that causes swelling, pain, and redness in the hands and feet that comes and goes. As a general rule, any patient who has a condition that comes and goes, who makes an appointment to see a doctor, can guarantee that condition won't be present when they show up at the doctor's office. It's just the way the universe works. This person told me that they had some photographs of their hands and feet when they were red and swollen, and I do look at photographs from time to time, especially in cases like this where the problem is intermittent. Then they did what 99% of patients who want to show me photographs do. They scrolled through their photos, and they scrolled through their photos, and they scrolled through their photos, wasting their time and mine. Folks, if you have photos that you feel are important to show to the doctor, be sure that you can locate them quickly. If you have an iPhone, put them in a folder where you can access them in seconds. Another tip regarding photos: people who've been injured in automobile accidents often want to show me pictures of the damage to their automobile. I've rarely found that to be helpful, and I did work in a trauma center emergency department for 5 years, the sort of place where we would get patients brought in by helicopter from severe automobile accidents. I found very little correlation between damage to an automobile and damage to a patient, which is what I focus on. In fact, many of the worst injured patients I saw weren't injured in the automobile. They were not wearing a seatbelt, collided with something at high speed, and went flying out the windshield of their automobile. Two more things that the patient who looked at some of my videos did correctly that not everyone does. Number one, he was reasonably polite. As I've said before, you don't have to kiss the doctor's behind. But I have some patients who come in, and before I've even finished introducing myself, they're ranting and raving about how upset they are. Let me say 3 things about that. Number one, I want to help patients in their disability application. Contrary to what some people say, I am not paid by Social Security to say that there's nothing wrong with people or that they're not disabled. I have never been pressured by the Social Security Administration to say that somebody was in better shape than I thought they were. The only time I've been contacted by the Social Security Administration is to clarify my exam findings. For example, I had a patient who had a very severe rash, and yes, you can qualify as disabled with certain severe rashes, and I didn't put down what percentage of his body area was involved in the rash. Social Security wanted me to give a percentage. That's the sort of thing they contact me about. And number two, the person who watched my videos didn't exaggerate or pretend. Doing these exams, the majority of patients that I see are honest and describe their problems as accurately as they can and cooperate with the exam as best they can. But there is a significant majority who exaggerate and or pretend, and it's part of my job to separate the two groups. If I find somebody has exaggerated or pretended one thing, it's natural to be suspicious of all the things they've shown me and done in the exam. It's hard to regain lost credibility. The best practice is to describe your problems and answer questions as accurately and truthfully as you can, and try as hard as possible to cooperate with the examination. And I'll finish with one more comment about cooperating with the examination. There are folks who hate being disabled so much that they'll really push it with cooperating with the examination. They'll usually try too hard with range of motion and or strength testing and injure themselves. These are usually folks with arthritis, bone, muscle, and joint problems. That is not what you need to do. Social Security wants to see what you could do reasonably comfortably over an 8-hour workday, not what you could do once and then be in so much pain that you have to go back home and lie down on your couch for the rest of the day. So do cooperate with the exam, but don't injure yourself. If something you're doing is very painful, or if the doctor asks you to do something that you think would be too painful or might cause you to fall, point that out to the doctor. Well, I hope this has been helpful, and as always, remember, if it happens, it's possible.